My name is Laura Bennett. I'm 41 years old, and the day my father stood in a courtroom claiming 3 luxury homes in the Florida Keys belonged to him, he thought he had already won. He looked confident. My relatives looked proud. His lawyer looked relaxed, and the judge was already reviewing the paperwork. My father leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said something that made several people in the courtroom whisper. The 3 vacation homes in the Florida Keys are ours. They were always meant for the family. Then he looked directly at me and smiled like the case was already over. What he didn't know was that I had been waiting 3 years for that exact moment. But before I tell you what happened next, take a second and comment your city below. I read every comment. And if you enjoy powerful stories about family betrayal, inheritance battles, and quiet revenge, make sure you subscribe, because sometimes the people who try to take everything from you end up revealing the truth themselves. 3 years earlier, my grandmother Margaret Bennett passed away. She had built a successful property investment business over 40 years. Most people in our town knew her as a sharp businesswoman who never made careless decisions. But to me, she was simply Grandma Margaret, the woman who taught me how to read contracts before I turned 18. The woman who once told me something I didn't understand until much later. Never argue with people who think they're smarter than you, she said. Let them prove it themselves. At the time, I laughed. I didn't realize those words would shape one of the most important moments of my life. When my grandmother died, she left behind a complicated estate. Multiple properties, investments, stocks, and 3 beautiful waterfront vacation homes in the Florida Keys. Those homes were her favorite places. She used to spend winters there watching the sunset over the ocean. The will reading happened 2 weeks after her funeral. My father arrived early with his lawyer. My uncles came too. Several relatives sat together whispering quietly. The lawyer opened the envelope and began reading. Most of the estate was divided between different family members, but when he reached the Florida properties, he paused. Then he said something that made my father sit up straight. The 3 residential properties located in the Florida Keys, everyone leaned forward, are to remain under the management of Laura Bennett. The room went quiet, not because I had received the homes, but because the will didn't say they were mine. It said I would manage them. My father immediately stood up. That doesn't make sense, he said sharply. Laura doesn't live in Florida. Why would she manage them? The lawyer calmly explained that the homes were placed inside a family trust. The trust would be managed by me until a later date. My father didn't like that answer. Not at all. Within a month, he filed a lawsuit. His argument was simple. He claimed my grandmother had intended the homes for the entire family, not just for me to control. Several relatives supported him. They said I was too young to handle valuable properties. They said it wasn't fair. And slowly, the story began spreading through the family, that I had manipulated my grandmother, that I had convinced her to give me control. For 2 years, the legal battle continued. Documents were requested, lawyers argued, court dates were postponed, and during all of that time, I stayed completely silent. I didn't argue with my father. I didn't defend myself, because my grandmother had taught me something important. Sometimes the best way to win is to let someone else speak first. Finally, the final court hearing arrived. The courtroom felt tense the moment we walked in. My father sat confidently beside his lawyer. My uncles sat behind him. Several relatives had even traveled across the state to watch. When the hearing began, my father's lawyer stood up and addressed the judge. "Your Honor," he said confidently, "the situation is quite simple." He explained that the Florida homes had always been used by the family. He argued that my grandmother intended them to remain shared property. Then he turned toward me slightly. "Miss Bennett is attempting to control assets that were clearly meant for everyone." My father nodded proudly. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't hesitate. "The 3 vacation homes in the Florida Keys are ours," he said. "They belong to the Bennett family." He looked directly at me. "You're just holding them." Several relatives nodded. For a moment, it looked like the judge might agree. Then the judge asked a single question. "Miss Bennett," he said calmly, "why did your grandmother choose you as the trustee?" The room became quiet. I stood up slowly. "Your Honor," I said, "I believe my grandmother expected this exact situation." The judge raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I reached into my bag and handed my lawyer a small envelope. He passed it to the judge. "This letter," I explained, "was written by my grandmother 1 month before she passed away." The judge opened it. He read silently for several seconds. Then his expression changed. He looked toward my father. "Mr. Bennet," the judge said slowly, "this letter explains exactly why your daughter was chosen." My father frowned. "What does it say?" The judge looked back at the letter. "Your mother wrote that the Florida homes should be protected from being sold." My father shifted in his seat. The judge continued reading. "She believed certain members of the family might attempt to sell the properties quickly for personal profit." The courtroom was silent now. Then the judge read the final line out loud. "I trust Laura because she is the only person in this family who never once asked me for money." My father's expression changed instantly. For the first time since the case began, he looked unsure. The judge closed the letter. Then he said something that ended the case. "The court recognizes Laura Bennett as the legal trustee of the Florida properties." The gavel struck once, and just like that, the case was over. My father sat there staring at the table. My relatives quietly gathered their things. No one spoke, because sometimes the loudest accusations collapse the moment the truth appears. Later that afternoon, I walked outside the courthouse. The sky was clear. The ocean breeze from the nearby harbor felt calm. My lawyer walked beside me and smiled. "Your grandmother was a very smart woman." I smiled too. "Yes," I said, "she always was." "And if you were in my place, would you have fought your family in court or walked away from everything? Tell me honestly in the comments. And don't forget to comment your city and subscribe for more powerful stories like this.